In the year 1883, the sun beat down on a land where mercy was a stranger and justice was buried under the desert sand. On the edge of New Mexico territory, there lived a rancher, a quiet man named Ethan Cole. He was no outlaw, no gunfighter, just a man who believed in honest work, in sweat, soil, and the freedom of open land. But in the West, peace never lasted long. A gang of ruthless men, killers, gamblers, and thieves had taken control of the nearest town. They called themselves the Blackthorn Riders. To them, life was cheap and loyalty was bought with blood. Ethan wanted no part of them. He refused to sell his cattle to fuel their saloons, refused to bow when they rode past his ranch. And for that, he earned their hate. One burning afternoon, under a sky red as fire, the riders came. They dragged Ethan and his closest friend, Daniel, from their horses. The desert wind howled as ropes cut into their wrists, binding them tight. The leader, a man with eyes as cold as iron, leaned close and whispered, "This desert will be your grave." They laughed as they left the two men stranded, tied beneath the pitiless sun, with nothing but sand stretching endless in every direction. Hours passed. The sun fell like a hammer, each breath drier than the last. Daniel's voice cracked with thirst. Ethan's vision blurred. Their lips split, their skin burned, and hope bled away into silence. But even as darkness crawled across the horizon, Ethan's heart refused to surrender. There, between life and death, he made a silent vow. If he ever stood again, the desert would not remember his death. It would remember his vengeance. The desert has a way of choosing its victims, and on that night, the desert chose Ethan Cole. The ropes bit into his skin, carving blood into his wrists. Every breath scraped his throat like broken glass. The sand beneath him burned, even after the sun had set. Around him, the silence was so complete, it screamed. Daniel lay beside him, barely breathing. His friend's lips were cracked, his eyes half closed, and each word that escaped him was nothing more than a whisper. "Ethan, it's over, let it go." But Ethan was not the kind of man who surrendered. Somewhere deep inside him burned a flame, faint, flickering, but alive. He clenched his fists against the rope. With every ounce of strength, he twisted, pulled, and tore at the knot. The fibers cut his flesh open, but he didn't stop. Blood ran down his hands, soaking into the desert sand. Minutes bled into hours. Then, at last, the rope snapped. Ethan collapsed, gasping. But he didn't waste time. With trembling hands, he crawled to Daniel and loosened his bonds. Daniel groaned. Half alive, half gone. The stars above shone cold and merciless. The desert stretched like an ocean of black dunes, endless and cruel. Ethan knew they had two choices: lie down and die, or crawl until horizon showed them mercy. He chose to crawl. With Daniel's arm slung across his shoulder, Ethan dragged himself forward. Each step was a battle, each breath a war. His boots tore against jagged rock, his knees shredded open, yet he moved. As the night deepened, memories flooded his mind. He saw his father's face, weathered, stern, a man of the soil. A Cole never quits, boy. Not when the land tests you, not when the world breaks you. Stand, and the world will remember your strength. He heard the soft laughter of a woman, Clara, the widow who lived near town. Her voice was gentle, a promise of something more than dust and silence. You're stronger than you think, Ethan. You just don't see it yet. Those voices carried him when his body failed. Hours turned to miles. Sandstorms rose like ghosts. stinging his skin, filling his lungs with fire. Coyotes circled in the distance, their eyes glowing under the moon. But Ethan pushed on, dragging Daniel's weight to the desert like a man hauling the chains of fate. By dawn his throat was raw, his vision swimming. He fell more than he stood, crawled more than he walked. His tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth, swollen and dry. The sun rose, burning down like judgment. Daniel slipped in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he muttered nonsense. Sometimes he cried for water. Ethan gave him none, because he had none to give. All he could offer was his strength, his stubborn will that refused to bow. At midday, they stumbled across a patch of cracked earth, an old military trail, long abandoned. Half-buried posts stuck from the ground like bones of forgotten men. Ethan recognized it. Somewhere along this trail stood the ruins of an old fort, a place once used by cavalry scouts before the riders burned it down. That fort was their only hope. Step by step, he dragged Daniel onward. His muscles screamed, his wounds split open, his vision blurred into white haze. Time lost meaning. Every second was pain. And then, just as his knees gave out, he saw it. The outline of crumbling walls, jagged against the horizon. A broken tower leaning sideways, blackened from fire. The fort, with the last of his strength. Ethan pulled Daniel through the shattered gates. The place was silent, haunted only by the echoes of battles long lost. But among the ruins lay what they needed most: shade, a chance to breathe, a chance to live. Ethan lowered Daniel against the wall and collapsed beside him. For a moment, he felt nothing but the weight of his own heartbeat. He was half dead, but he was alive. Daniel opened his eyes, weak but still breathing. You dragged me 10 miles, Ethan. Why? Ethan's answer was simple. Because I wasn't about to let the desert decide who we are. Above them, the vultures circled. The desert hadn't finished with Ethan Cole. But for the first time since the Blackthorn Riders left him to die, Ethan felt something stronger than pain. He felt purpose. He had survived. He had defied the desert. And somewhere deep in his chest, a storm of vengeance began to rise. The town of Red Rock was no longer the town Ethan Cole remembered. When he and Daniel stumbled back from the desert after days of agony, their bodies broken but their will unbroken, the world around them had changed. Red Rock had fallen into shadow. The Blackthorn Riders now owned the streets. Their horses drank from the public wells. Their guns silenced any voice that dared to rise. Merchants paid them in gold. Ranchers paid them in cattle. And anyone who refused vanished. The sheriff? Dead. The judge? Run out of town. What stood in their place was fear. And yet, when the townsfolk saw Ethan Cole walking through the dust-choked street, skin burned, clothes torn, eyes burning with fire, their whispers spread like lightning. He's alive, the desert didn't take him. Cole came back. God help the riders now. The riders had left him to rot, buried by sun and sand. But Ethan's return was like a ghost walking out of the grave. He didn't speak much. His body still ached, and Daniel was better than fighting fever. But Ethan's silence was louder than any words. He walked through the town with a steady gaze, a man no longer living for himself, but for something greater. Inside the saloon, laughter died when he pushed open the doors. The piano stopped. Cards froze on the table. Men who'd once mocked him now stared like they'd seen a specter. One of the riders spat tobacco and muttered, "Should have stayed dead, Cole." Ethan said nothing. His eyes did the talking. Cold, relentless, a promise carved in steel. That night, he returned to his ranch. The place was stripped bare, fences torn, cattle stolen, fields trampled into dust. His life's work reduced to ashes by men who thought they'd buried him. Standing among the ruins, Ethan laid his hand on the old Winchester rifle his father once carried in the war. The barrel was rusted, the stock scarred, but it still fired true. Slowly, carefully, he cleaned it, oiled it, polished it, like a priest tending to a sacred relic. The rifle was more than a weapon. It was a bond, a legacy, a final answer to the cruelty of the riders. Word spread through Red Rock. Ethan Cole was preparing. Children whispered his name like a legend. Old men nodded with knowing eyes. And a widow, Clara, came to see him as dusk fell. She stood in the doorway of the ruined ranch, her shawl wrapped tight against the desert wind. Her voice trembled but carried strength. "Ethan, the town needs you. We can't live like this anymore. People believe in you. I believe in you." For a long time, Ethan didn't answer. He simply stared at the horizon, where the setting sun bled across the desert like a wound. Finally, his voice came, low and steady. "I didn't come back for glory. I came back because no man, no gang, has the right to own this land. Not while I breathe." Clara's eyes glistened. She placed her hand gently on his arm. "Then give us a reason to stand again." That night, Ethan prepared like a man walking into destiny. He strapped on his old revolver, loaded 6 bullets, each one meant for riders. He packed ammunition for the Winchester, every round a promise of justice. He tightened his boots, pulled his hat low over his brow, and looked once more at the picture of his family that hung cracked and faded on the wall. Outside, the desert wind howled, carrying whispers of a coming storm. Daniel, pale and weak in bed, caught Ethan's hand before he left. "Don't do this alone, Ethan." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I started this alone, Daniel. I'll finish it the same way." As he mounted his horse beneath the cold light of the moon, the town watched from their windows. Mothers held their children close. Old men tipped their hats in silent prayer. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of hooves against dry earth. Ethan Cole was riding out, not as a rancher, not as a man betrayed, but as a storm that would not stop until every blackthorn rider was dust beneath his boots. And when dawn came, Red Rock would either be free or would be drenched in blood. The night in Red Rock was heavy with silence, a silence so thick it seemed the desert itself was holding its breath. The moon hung high, silver light spilling across the empty streets. The wooden boards of the saloon creaked. Dust rolled through the alleys like restless spirits. And then came the sound. Hoofbeats. Ethan Cole rode into town like a shadow carved from steel. His Winchester rested across his saddle, his revolver at his side. The townsfolk watched from behind shutters, eyes wide, hearts pounding. They knew what was coming. The Blackthorn riders were waiting. Inside the saloon, lanterns burned bright, laughter echoing like jackals. The riders drank and gambled, their pistols lying loose on the tables. They weren't afraid. Why should they be? They buried Ethan once. But when the saloon doors swung open with a crash, and Ethan Cole stepped inside, the laughter died. Every head turned. Cards froze midair. Whiskey glasses trembled in calloused hands. The leader, Marcus Blackthorne himself, leaned back in his chair, boots propped on the table. His smile was slow, cruel. Well, look what the desert coughed up. A ghost. Ethan's voice was low, steady, a voice carved from stone. I'm no ghost. I'm the man you should have killed clean. The room erupted. Chairs scraped. Guns flashed. But Ethan was faster. The Winchester roared, thunder rolling through the saloon. A rider flew backward, crashing through a window. Another reached for his pistol. Too slow. Ethan's revolver barked, the shot spinning him lifeless to the floor. Chaos exploded. The riders scrambled, firing wildly. Bullets tore splinters from the walls, shattered bottles, sent screams echoing into the night. But Ethan moved like a man possessed. Every shot was precise. Every step forward was death for the men who had left him to die. His eyes burned with fury. His aim never faltered. One by one, the riders fell. The saloon that had once been filled with laughter and so now filled with smoke and screams. The piano collapsed under gunfire, lanterns shattered, flames licking the walls. When the smoke cleared, only two men stood, Ethan Cole and Marcus Blackthorne. The leader rose slowly, his chair falling back. His eyes gleamed with madness, his hands hovering over the twin pistols at his hips. He stepped into the street, and Ethan followed. The town gathered the edges, watching in silence. Mothers clutched children close. Old men muttered prayers. They knew they were about to witness something they would speak of for generations. The two men faced each other beneath the pale moonlight. The air was thick, every heartbeat echoing louder than a drum. Marcus smirked, spitting into the dirt. You should have stayed down, Cole. This land belongs to me. Ethan's jaw tightened, his voice cutting through the silence. This land belongs to no man. It belongs to the people who bleed for it, and you've bled enough of them. For a long moment, nothing moved. Even the wind held still. Then the sound of the gun hammer pulling back. Two hands twitched. Two pistols flashed. But Ethan was faster. One shot split the night, echoing across the desert like thunder. Marcus staggered, eyes wide, hands clutching his chest. He fell to his knees, choking on his last breath, before collapsing into the dust. The town was silent. Then a cheer rose, trembling at first, then growing louder. The spell of fear was broken. The riders were gone. Red Rock was free. Ethan stood in the street, smoke rising from his revolver, chest heaving. The people rushed out, surrounding him with tears, cheers, and gratitude. But Ethan didn't raise his hands in victory. He didn't smile. He only looked at the broken body of Marcus Blackthorne, and then at the horizon, where the desert stretched endless and cold. Clara stepped forward, her eyes shining with tears. She reached for Ethan's hand, her voice soft, trembling. "You saved us, Ethan. You gave us back our home." For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to breathe. His voice was quiet, heavy with the weight of all he had endured. "I didn't do it for glory. I did it because no one deserves chains in the land of the free." The people of Red Rock would remember that night. They would tell their children and their children's children of the man who came back from death, who fought not for riches, not for power, but for justice. As the dawn broke, painting the desert gold, Ethan Cole mounted his horse. The town called out, begging him to stay, to lead them, to be their sheriff. But he only tipped his hat, eyes still set on the horizon. "I'm no lawman, just a rancher who stood his ground." And with that, he rode away. The desert wind carried his name long after he was gone. Ethan Cole, the cowboy who defied death, the man the desert could not bury, the storm that set Red Rock free. And so his legend lived on, written not in books, but in the dust, the wind, and the hearts of those who whispered his story beneath the wide, endless sky.